way to be sure that we're in God. Anyone who claims to be intimate with God ought to live the same life that Jesus lived. True? I think so too. Here, John says, if you want to know if someone is a real Christian, don't just ask them what they believe, look at how they live. My mother used to say the proof was in the pudding. You know, do they do it or not? Do they do it or not? Disturbing. How many of you know what Barna is? B-A-R-N-A. They are one of the largest polling. They're like Gallup. Only they poll about certain Christian beliefs. They're a large polling group. Disturbing poll. Compared the behavior of so-called born-again Christians with the rest of the population. They took a control group of people who were not Christian, and they compared them to a group of people who said that they were. And they went through this long polling set of questions. And the problem was the contrast was hard to find. They couldn't find any real differences between the control group who said they weren't Christians and the group that said that they were. I think that's a shame. This is a national polling group. Here in verse 6 it says, whoever claims to live in him must walk as Jesus walked. The word walk in the original language means to have a daily active living style. How many of you remember the little bracelets, WWJJ? What did that stand for? What would Jesus do? Popular in the late 90s, but I want you to think about it. What would Jesus do? Better question is, what would Jesus do if he were me? What would Jesus do if he were Kidder? How would that look? How would that live out? And that very quickly begins to define a lot of things in a lot of people's lives. If I were Jesus, what would my life live out to those people on the outside of me? How would they see him if they looked at me and I told them that Jesus lives on the inside of me? How would that be portrayed? I think it's real important for us to take into consideration, that every day you are a living epistle. That's what Paul says. You are the living testament of Jesus Christ. When you make a statement that you're born again, you make a statement that you're a Christian, you make a statement that you go to church, all of those things, you become a person of interest to other people. They begin to watch you. They begin to watch to see what you do, how you act, what you say, where you go, what you drink, what you eat, how you live, the cars you drive, everything. You become a person of interest to them. And I want you to ask yourself, if Jesus were a truck driver, what kind of truck driver would he be? Would he be a safe one? Would he be one that always checked his rig before he got out on the road? Would he be someone who honked the horn if the little guy driving by said, "Dee"? Would Jesus honk the horn? He probably would. He probably would, because he is all things to all people. Paul said, I must learn to live my life to be all things to all men so that some might find him. What if Jesus were a middle management? What kind of middle manager would he be? Let's think about this. Would he be the kind that talks behind the boss's back while the boss is out of the room? Would he make unreasonable demands of people in his department? Would he himself or she herself do the bare minimum of work expected? No. Pad their expense account. That's if he were a middle management. What if he were a parent? What kind of parent would Jesus be? What kind of TV shows would he let his kids watch? What video games would he let them have? Probably wouldn't. He'll get carpal thumb. What kind of attention would he help his children have to their homework? Or would he say, just go watch TV because Dad's busy now? Would he say something like that? I can't see Jesus doing that. So the life that he lived on this earth, we should have that same kind of life about everyone. We shouldn't be short with them because we've had a bad day. I don't really read that Jesus ever had a bad day. He had some days that were tough, but the things, even when he had his tough days, he said, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. He didn't sit there and curse them and spit on them. He was releasing them. What kind of spouse would Jesus be? What kind of attributes would he carry? I mean, when you start to put all those things into mind, what kind of school teacher would he have been? What kind of chemistry teacher? Would he have passed everyone, whether they deserved it or not? Given them one more try to blow up the school? Didn't do it last time, but we might this time. Sandra was a chemistry teacher. It's certainly true that knowing and doing go together, right? Knowing and doing now. So do me a favor now, skip over to 1 John 3. 1 John 3. Oh, those are sweet sounds. My mother-in-law, when she got saved, was, and I'm not talking out of school because she's not here to defend herself. She wrote this in one of her books. She would smoke 5 packages of cigarettes every day. She would light one in the morning, and that would be the only cigarette she lit. She would light the next one off of the end of the other one. There was never a time that my former wife can remember before she got saved without a cigarette in her hand, because that's just who she was. She drank martinis like they were going out of style. She cursed like a sailor. She went to the Fontainebleau in Miami and danced all night long. I mean, she would tell you the Holy Gully. If you could remember that, you're too old. Okay, because that's what she would say. But she smoked 5 packages of cigarettes, and she was involved in an accident, and that accident cost her sight after a while because it actually loosened the lens in her eyes, and they were going to have to remove the lenses of her eyes, and she had to wear contacts and glasses to be able to see, but she was able to see very, very well. But when she was working her life out after that accident, after having the surgery, and she was wearing a patch, she used to wear things like sexy on her eye patch and sequins. My mother-in-law was very colorful if you didn't know her. Before she got saved, I would have liked to have known her back then because she must have been a hoot. But she'd wear sexy and all kinds of things that she'd put on her eye patch, and get people's attention. And one day, the pastor who would eventually pastor her came in, and this was after they had a relationship and she was going to church, and he walked in on her and she had a cigarette in her. Oh God. And he walked in and she said, he didn't even say anything. He didn't say anything condemning. He didn't say anything bad to her. She said, well, I'd just quit this thing if I could. And Peter Slagle, who was her pastor, said, have you ever thought that he would help you if you asked? That's all he said. He didn't come down on her. He didn't condemn her. He didn't do any of those things. And that little moment, she put out that cigarette and she never lit another one. Going from 5 packs of cigarettes a day. Wow. I mean, that's like unheard of. Let's read here. 1 John chapter 3, we're going to start reading verse 7. So my dear children, don't let anyone divert you from the truth. It's the person who acts right who is right, just as we see it lived out in our righteous Messiah. Those who make a practice of sin are straight from the devil, the pioneer in the practice of sin. The Son of God entered the scene to abolish the devil's ways. People conceived and brought into life by God don't make a practice of sin. How could they? God's seed is deep within them, making them who they are. It's not in the nature of a God-begotten to practice and parade sin. Here's how you tell the difference. Here's the thing again. Here's that question. Here's how you tell the difference between God's children and the devil's children. The one who won't practice righteous ways isn't from God, nor is the one who won't love brother and sister. That's really important. See, I think a lot of times preachers will emphasize that first part, who don't practice sin. But they forget about the loving of other people. And he said it's a simple test. Anyone who won't love his brother or sister. He's not talking about sin being a habitual behavior. It's not something that we as people do. We don't purposely live in sin. He's saying, you know what, momentary lapses are okay. We don't have to be perfect. God's not asking for perfect kids. You know what? Because I've had mine, and there was not one of them perfect. I thought they would be. I thought I could control their actions. But you know what? Every time I tried to control them, they would jump out of that. They'd be good in that area that we were working on, and then it'd slip over here. We'd work on that one, and it'd slip over here. That's because we're just human beings, and God knows that about us. But he says, you know, that habitual thing, that thing that kind of snares us, he says that's the thing that you can tell the differences, because Christians grow in their understanding about who God is and how big he is. And that was one thing that my mother-in-law realized, is that, you know what, I never thought about asking him about help for that. And it was at that moment that she said, you know what, with his help, it'll be okay. And she put that cigarette out. Where are the things that people see in our life that are ongoing that we can't get rid of without his help? All we got to do is say, help me, save me from whatever it is. Just help me with this one thing. And I tell people all the time, you know, well, how do you become a Christian? Well, the good news is you don't have to work at it. You don't. And I don't know a lot of people that ever, you know, how many have ever been fishing? This is the story, the analogy that I tell people all the time. You go fishing, what do you do first? Do you catch it or do you clean it first? God's not asking for people who are already clean to come to him. He's just asking you to come, and he will start that cleansing process on the inside. Little bit by little bit. My mother-in-law wasn't perfect overnight. The cigarettes went away, maybe. The cocktails went away later. The dancing, she just changed from one dance floor to another. You know, she changed activities, but she still had that joy about her. The whole point is that our life can be filled with good things. And the test of a real Christian is, are you happy? Even in the midst of bad things, are you still happy? I talked with Kenda the other day, and I said, you know what? We may have momentary challenges, and that's to be expected, because the enemy really wants to derail us if he can. The good news is, even in the moments of that time when we're being kind of tested by the devil, do you really believe? Yeah, I do. And I'm going to stick with it. I'm going to stick with it. Being a Christian, we should pursue growth in both knowledge and actions. And as a pastor, I've learned a lot about talking to people about living a deeper life. And it's not just about information, folks. It's not about getting more Bible. It's not about information. It's about transformation. Taking the knowledge that you have and letting it change you. It's just like where we started, where John started. It's like that seatbelt. I know it can save lives, but I got to do something with it. I've got to take it and make it a part of my life every single day. So my conclusion for today is, are you becoming more Christ-like every day? Getting a little closer into that perfection. He says, be ye perfect as I am. Well, you know what? I'm an imperfect human being trying to do something which I think is impossible. But that's when he turns around and says, all things are possible to those that believe. Every day we get a little closer, because we get a little closer to heaven by getting a little closer to him every single day. Aren't we glad? And aren't we glad some of us didn't go last night? That we're all here today.